Hello and welcome to our new program, India's World. Today we are going to discuss the implications for India of US troop pullout in 2014 in Afghanistan. Some recent developments suggest that Pakistan may once again be getting into driver's seat for a political settlement in that country. To discuss this, we have a very distinguished panel with us. We have Ambassador Vivek Katju, who's India's former ambassador to Afghanistan. You were there at a very difficult time, Vivek. Ambassador Leela Ponappa, Deputy National Security Advisor and expert on India's neighborhood and security issues. And we have Mr. A.K. Verma, the former Chief of Research and Analysis Wing and another security expert. So welcome to this program. Let me begin with you, Vivek. On New Year's Eve, Pakistan released 8 Taliban leaders, including Nuruddin Turabi, who was the Justice Minister under the Taliban regime. And in November, they had released 18 other Taliban leaders so that they can negotiate peace with the Americans and with the Afghans. Now, this was part of a 5-point program that the US, the Afghan High Peace Council had enlisted. And the first point is to seek the collaboration of Pakistan and cooperation of Pakistan for peace in Afghanistan. Now, do you think that the Afghans and the Americans have come to the conclusion that without Pakistan, there can be no peace in Afghanistan?
Well, they always had that conclusion. That's an inescapable fact. If you go back, the Taliban were the creatures of Pakistan. Whatever people may say, they were created by the Pakistanis. In 2001, the Taliban were pushed out of Afghanistan into Pakistan. And the Pakistanis played a brilliant game. One must give credit to their diplomacy and their strategic approach here. They kept the Taliban and nurtured them while keeping the American focus on the Al-Qaeda. And after 2003, they allowed the Taliban gradually to make their presence felt, initially in the south, in the eastern parts of Afghanistan, and later in other parts. By 2007, the Taliban were back in reckoning. And who held the key to the Taliban? The Pakistanis. So everyone knew this, that at the end, in the end game, it will be the Pakistanis who will hold all the cards. And the Pakistanis have signaled this all through, that unless their interests in Afghanistan are fully protected, they will not allow a deal. So when you say that, have they come to a conclusion now? Well, that was obvious and they knew this.
Leela, do you think the Americans are outsourcing the peace process, the political settlement in Afghanistan to Pakistan? Earlier, they were quite close to India, and they were accusing Pakistanis of even padding up their coalition support fund bills and not releasing those funds. Now they've released 700 million. So does it mean that now Pakistan will be in the front seat settling the Afghan issue?
I think Pakistan has always had a very strong voice in the American establishment because they have lobbies in different parts of the American establishment, whether it's the CIA, Pentagon, State Department, and so on. Following up from what Vivek said, that the Americans have always seen a role for Pakistan, yes, there was a hiatus. I recall when the first convoy attacks took place in 2008. And this was discussed with fairly senior, I would say the senior most military commanders at that time in the region. They attempted to brush it off. And of course, we have seen to what extent Pakistan took the movement of convoys in terms of shutting them down totally for 6 months to prove their point. So I think the Americans have recognized that the Pakistan role is to be accepted. This has been evident in all the different conferences on Afghanistan as well. I think to say that they are outsourcing it might perhaps be stretching it up to a point. But the Americans are anxious to get out. For whatever reason. I think there's been a lot of confused thinking in America's objectives in Afghanistan.
We will come to that in a minute.
But certainly they see that Pakistan, it is more helpful to America to have Pakistan work alongside, even if they do not see their interests as totally convergent.
Do you think, Mr. Verma, that US wants to work with Pakistan because they need Pakistan for 2 reasons? One, to get the Taliban to the negotiating table. And second, when they have to pull out, how do they pull out? The men and materials have to move through secure routes through Pakistan. They need access to Karachi port. So what is wrong if they depend on Pakistan so much in Afghanistan?
In my view, the US will try to get the support of any party which can help them to get out of Afghanistan and sort out this imbroglio.
Yeah.
For a long time, they didn't wish to give that role to Pakistan, but now it has appeared as 2014 years that Pakistan cannot be deprived of a role which falls on its shoulders naturally, and they better recognize it. Pakistan has a lot of maneuvering power inside Afghanistan. It has always had it. Even before Taliban came into power, even during the time of Zahir Shah, Pakistan was always a factor so far as Afghanistan is concerned. And now that is being regretfully recognized by the Americans. And by releasing these 8 people.
Why regretfully?
The Americans are regretful that they have to fall back on Pakistan. They never wanted to. They thought they would be able to find a solution with the help of their own might and diplomacy or whatever and funding, but they haven't succeeded. So they have come to this conclusion that Pakistan is needed ultimately, and that is what they are doing. And here I see Pakistan developing a new-found confidence. Firstly, it is telling the Taliban that, look, we don't stand in your way. They never did, but here is an overt episode. 2, they are telling the Americans that, look, if you ever wanted us to remain bound to a philosophy of keeping Taliban under restraint, we are getting out of that now. Okay. And 3, they are responding to Karzai's efforts and messages that please cooperate, let's have a solution, even if it means getting in touch with Taliban and bringing them on board.
Vivek, Americans wanted to move from a military mission into a transformation mission. They want to transform Afghanistan. They've set up the Afghan National Army, the Afghan National Police. They want to change politics in a way that women's participation goes up. They want peace and reconciliation. Will all this be possible if Taliban are part of the power structure in Kabul?
You see, the Americans had a very simplistic approach. Their approach was that you create or reinforce the central authority in Afghanistan, get rid of all the other players, give the central authority the coercive apparatus of state, and that will be all the work. The Taliban, and here is the crucial issue, the Taliban as of now have shown that they are incapable of being participants in a kind of a participatory process. The crucial thing is, will Afghanistan be an Islamic republic or will it be an Islamic emirate?
Okay, we'll come back to that. I'll just come back to you in a minute. We need to take a break. Don't go away. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV. We'll be back soon. Welcome back. We were discussing the implications for India of US troop pullout from Afghanistan in 2014. Before we went on the break, Vivek, you were saying that the Taliban are incapable of participating in a democratic process.
That is my assessment. There are some indications which I think they've been giving because they've gone for these talks in Paris, which was held by some think tank. But I do not believe that the Taliban are capable of, taking part in a coalition. Their ideological framework till now has been such that the hardcore of the Taliban certainly wouldn't like to take part in any such coalition.
Leela, let me ask you a slightly different question. With the coming in of John Kerry as Secretary of State in America, are we going to miss Hillary Clinton? Because a lot of people say John Kerry has a special relationship with Pakistan.
Oh, I think Hillary Clinton will be missed. There's no question about that. But I think we really need to go beyond personalities to how America is going to handle this situation. The withdrawal has already been referred to. And really, when you get back to the question of what the nature of cooperation from Pakistan is going to be, whether it is as requested by Afghanistan or by the United States, it's really of 2 kinds. One is Pakistan says, well, as long as Pakistan has a place at the high table as part of a core group, then it will selectively cooperate. And mind you, even the release of these Taliban leaders has been selective. So it is questionable as to what extent they will go. They're obviously calibrating it. The other is, of course, the whole issue of safe havens in Pakistani territory. They too continue to flourish and to play.
Surely they'll be wound down if they participate in the establishment in Kabul.
Not necessarily, not necessarily, because Pakistan would then retain the option to exercise them. Everybody assumed that when the Americans went in after 9/11, that in fact I think the Americans assumed that with an ally across the border, it would be a simple job of finishing off Al-Qaeda and going home.
Okay, you were saying something quickly.
No, I'll be very quick. I think on safe havens, I entirely agree with Leela. I don't think the Pakistanis are going to give that up. They're going to hold the Taliban very close to their chest. But on the high table thing, Leela, they always were on the high table.
Indeed.
What they denied us, what they denied was India place on the high table.
Okay.
The transformation which has taken place in international diplomatic efforts on Afghanistan is the realization by the international community that India must also be on the high table. The interesting thing to watch will be whether Pakistan will now try to elbow us out.
Okay, on that note, I'll move to you, sir. Mr. Verma, tell me what are the implications of Pakistan being on the high table in Afghanistan and India probably being out or having a reduced role? What are the security implications for us?
Pakistan's objective will be to get us out of that high table. Yeah. I wouldn't say we are yet on the high table, but we could well be, because if consolidation and interests of peace are to be considered, India has to be on the high table. And this is unacceptable to Pakistan, only to the extent that they can't totally bring it about. Only to that extent they would want us to be on the high table. But I don't think that the Pakistani efforts will necessarily succeed, because there is a congruence of interests between United States and us, and in a certain sense with Iran, and in another sense with Russia, who all want stability in the region and opportunity for economic development of Central Asian republics, which is a necessary condition for, dependent on a necessary condition dependent on the stability of Afghanistan. Yeah. So if you take into account all these factors, Pakistan is not going to succeed.
Okay, Leela, you wanted to say something.
Yes, the point being, or let's say the question is who is going to be at the high table. On the one hand, you had the United States trying to engineer the whole thing. Increasingly, there is discussion about the regional countries playing a role. SCO is coming into prominence, which means China also enters the equation.
I'll just come to that in a minute.
All right, yeah.
Vivek, I want to ask you, since you've been associated with Afghanistan for so long, do you think our policies in Afghanistan have failed? That, we supported a nascent democracy in the hope that all the ethnicities would be represented, this would bring peace to Afghanistan, and we were actually riding piggyback on US and NATO military efforts. And now that they want to pull out, we have nothing to ride on.
No, I don't think that's true. I think that's misleading. We were not riding piggyback on anyone, at least for a long period. I don't know what is the latest. Frankly, I don't have any access to what is the latest thinking in official circles here. We were very keen in Afghanistan to show that we were an independent player. And I think that was recognized by all Afghans, and it is because of that Indian assistance efforts are the most popular of all efforts. India is considered as a trusted
Yet Pakistan
friend.
is going to be on the high table, and with all your efforts,
no. If I may just, Pakistan, the Afghans recognize, has the capacity to harm. India is because it has the capacity and it has shown implementation of the capacity to help. Now, it's in the nature of things that those who can harm are feared. So the Pakistanis are feared. And therefore the high table.
Okay. Leela, assume that post-2014, the Taliban are in the power structure, there's a political settlement in Afghanistan. Now, this pacification of the AFPAC border because of this, would it free up militants, Islamic fundamentalists, who then would be directed towards India? Because, there's no jihad to be won in Afghanistan.
Well, we've seen this happen once before in the past, and I think in addition to the freeing up of the militants, and there has been no serious let-up in terms of the training of militants to cross into India, is also the huge amount of military hardware that is not only already exists, but that is going to be coming into Afghanistan, which the Americans will leave behind as their supposed legacy. It may not necessarily be everything that the Afghan security forces need, but it will be of a sufficient volume and capacity to create problems for us. So yes, I think we have to be prepared for that and make sure that in terms of whatever capacities and capabilities our people need, they are well in place.
Okay, Vivek, you want to say something?
Just one quick thing.
Yeah.
In addition to freeing up manpower, I think there's also the question of encouragement. They'll feel their morale boost will be enormous.
Okay.
That we've thrown out the Americans, we threw out the Soviets, now we've thrown out the Americans. And we've got to factor that.
You already have the Vietnam reference made by the Taliban.
We need to take a break at this juncture. Don't go away, keep watching Rajya Sabha TV. Welcome back. We are discussing the pullout of US troops from Afghanistan and its implications for India. Mr. Verma, let me come to you. What does India need to do now in these changed circumstances? How do we need to adapt our policies to the developing situation?
I think we continue to keep following the policies that we have already made of trying to increase our profile and footprint in Afghanistan in a very orderly and in a manner that it doesn't create any controversies. That means economic development. That means trying to see that a consensus develops.
How do you factor in the Taliban in the power structure?
Well, that's a question about which an answer is not easy to give, because Afghanistan is not a nation state. It has never been. And the tribe predates the state in Afghanistan. And this tribal culture in Kandahar and Helmand region is mullah dominated, and it is acquiring some self-confidence. That's why we see insurgency increasing. So I'm not quite sure, firstly, whether US will pull out 100%. I don't think it'll pull out 100%. It might get its boots out, but it's going to leave air power plus special forces.
Yeah, we'll come.
And as long as these Americans are there, it'll be unacceptable to this category of Taliban. So I don't see how they will agree to come to a solution.
Okay.
I find that very difficult to believe. Okay. And if Talibans continue in this frame of mind and the Americans continue to have an existence there, I don't think there's much danger to India. Okay. And there's one more factor I would like to draw your attention to,
quickly,
that Pakistan itself is now a divided state. There is a war going between the state and the Talibans, the TTP. And this war, it seems to me...
These are Pakistani Taliban though. They're directed towards Islamabad as opposed to Taliban who are directed towards Kabul.
Right. So this TTP seems to be having the upper hand at the moment, and the state appears to be weakening. And if this continues, then Pakistan will not have the same freedom to pursue its aims with regard to Taliban.
But on the other hand, Bharat, this might help them to deal with their own Taliban.
Bharat, on the larger issue that you raised, we've played this game before. We've played it well. We know how to protect our interests. That's not the worry that I have. The worry that I have is linking our policies towards Afghanistan in the fond hope that our policies there shouldn't impact on our relations with Pakistan.
Okay.
That is my crucial worry.
Okay. Leela, now suppose you wanted a peaceful Pakistan. Do you think a peaceful Afghanistan, would such an Afghanistan have to be neutral? Which an Afghanistan that's not aligned to Pakistan and that's also not aligned to India, so that the India-Pakistan rivalry is not played out in Kabul.
Again, the whole trap that I was saying, you're falling into that, Bharat. Come
No,
on.
I mean, this is the whole point, you see, that, I mean, earlier in this program, we talked about India's relations with Afghanistan and the sort of linkage with the Americans and so on. I think India's equations with Afghanistan go way far behind. I mean, they are much, much older than what I would really call a very recent interest of the United States and its allies in this region. And I'm talking about a serious interest in terms of commitment of troops and so on. India's engagement with Afghanistan, whether under different regimes, post-independence, has covered many different aspects. And it's never been a question of linking up issues between India and Pakistan in Afghanistan. Also, Afghanistan has never publicly taken a position on issues concerning India and Pakistan. India has never taken a position concerning Afghanistan and Pakistan. So therefore, I think to triangulate it would be a very serious mistake.
But let me triangulate it. Let me ask you a question, Vivek. Do you think a time will come where India and Pakistan could be on the same page in Afghanistan? After all, they have similar interests. Both want trade with Central Asia. Both want a stable Afghanistan. If there's instability in Afghanistan, it affects Pakistan, as you have said, and with a delayed effect, it impacts India. So why can't India and Pakistan come on the same page? Or do you think they'll come on the same page but read different texts?
Bharat, don't be naive. The Pakistanis have indicated to us and to the world that they don't want India to have a role in Afghanistan. They are not even willing to discuss Afghanistan officially with us. Now, I do not know why there are some people in Delhi who have this. Again, I'm sorry.
Oh, there are some people in Islamabad also.
No. People in Islamabad are of no consequence. The army is the only institution which is of any consequence vis-a-vis India and Afghanistan. Let's face it. But this fond hope that we'll come on the same page.
All right. You were saying something that US troops will not pull out completely. 10,000, 20,000 will remain there. Then there
No, I didn't say the number.
No, I'm saying that some numbers have come, the non-combat troops. There would be these security contractors. One doesn't know what will happen to them, about 100,000, 140,000. Also, the Taliban, the regime that will come, the power sharing that will take place, the regime will not be the same as the Taliban regime of 1996-2001. So such a Afghanistan, would it be at the beck and call of Pakistan?
Your question presupposes that there will be a coalition government in Kabul.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure of that.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure whether the Taliban, the Kandahar, the Mullah Omar type of Taliban will join this coalition, or if they do join, they will have a hidden agenda, that is to get rid of the others. Yes. And there will be a continuous conflict going on.
Okay, quickly now.
There is a point I would like to make here in the context of what has been said. Yeah. Whether India and Afghanistan will always remain together. There could be don't forget that the Taliban are fired not only by Pashtun, a sense of Pashtun nationalism, but also an ideological sense where Islam is concerned. So if Islam ever comes into a question between Afghanistan and India and Pakistan in that triangular relationship, I'm not sure if Afghanistan will continue to be on the side of India. Okay. Because it has happened once in 1971 war. When our Air Force bombed Peshawar, then our good friend the Afghans, that time Zahir Shah was the king, they protested. He said, how can you bomb this territory? So when our ambassador of those days, General Thapa, went to see the head of the Foreign Office, he said, you are our friends, but they are our brothers.
Okay, quickly, in half a minute, what do we need to do in Afghanistan?
Well, I think sustain our presence. We've just signed a strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan, put substance into it, but make it very clear that we are not in there to counter Pakistan. Pakistan has its own agenda, and I think, quite frankly, this notion of India and Pakistan working together, they've been invited to join, first of all, in discussing Afghanistan, to joining us in the development program, doesn't work. Yeah.
Okay, Vivek, last word to you.
We have an independent policy towards Afghanistan, assisting them, also assisting them fully in the security dimension as they want, and not being bothered about Pakistan and the impact of the impact of our relationship with Afghanistan on Pakistan, that Bharat would be suicidal for us in Afghanistan.
Okay. Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Leela. Thank you, Mr. Verma. Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you, for watching this program. We'll be back again next week with a new subject. Till then, goodbye. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.